We are running a little bit. We are running a little bit behind, as you can see. So the lunch is here. If folks want to get some food and bring it in during the program, we promise that that's okay, and nobody will get scans. But we do want to continue to move forward. So feel free to grab some food and come back. But we're going to go ahead and start. Ahmed.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again, and thank you for attending our events today. Again, as Jim said, we're running a little bit late, and I don't want to stand between people and lunch. So this will be a quick introduction. Since also this is a panel of four, from left to right. Dareen, I mean, they're all colleagues, and it's an honor to introduce them to you. Dareen Khalifa, you have the bios and attached to the agenda. Yeah? No?
Yes, we have the bios.
Okay. So there are some fans here, some for Dareen, some for Rabia, Jumana, Marcel, I'm sure.
No. I don't have any.
Has a long list of fans. There is absolutely no need for me to reiterate the importance that civil society plays in combating extremism, and violent discourse, as well as the services they provide as we speak to Syrian communities inside Syria. It will not take too much time, and I would like to start with Rabia, who would talk about the role of civil society in general from his experience. And then I will let Marcel talk about whatever she wants to talk about. Then in the same order, Jumana and then Dareen can give us some perspective about some future scenarios. So Rabia, please.
Thank you, Mohammed. It's a good move to start with me. Very low expectations, and everyone can just impress all the way on through. When I was asked to talk today, I was quite honestly not sure exactly what I should say. I thought the best thing I can do is just... Can you guys hear me okay? Is just speak to my experiences that I've had thus far, working with the Democracy Council, but also more importantly, with Gaziantep over the last 3 years. For years, President Obama has told the American public that no reliable partner exists in Syria. Well, the work I have done on Syria over the last 3 years with Syrian civil society groups across the country that directly contradicts this. The ongoing narrative being pushed by policymakers in the media that Syria is in a war between Assad and ISIS has misguided the public, leading many to think that no alternative to these barbaric options exists. However, this narrative fails to capture a little-known fact, that civil society and local governance actors have quietly laid the foundational future for Syria already. And now it's time to build upon it, not leave it for abandonment, as many in the city have increasingly seemed to be suggesting. Today, civil society and local governance groups across the country, in every imaginable sector, cover all of Syria. Once you get to know these characters, as I've had the privilege to, you can't but be inspired. Their stories include the doctor who decided to return to Aleppo despite ongoing regime shelling after his colleague, one of the last remaining pediatricians left in Aleppo, was killed in recent regime strikes in Al-Quds hospital. They include the media activist in Idlib, who has survived 2 assassination attempts and been detained multiple times for Jabhat al-Nusra, but refuses to leave the city and continues to air radio shows that discusses the tolerant and peaceful nature of Islam, reaching over 400,000 listeners on any given day. They include women groups in Ma'at al-Noman, who've led protests for over 60 days against Jabhat al-Nusra, successfully pushing them out of the city. They include activists in Raqqa, who despite having lost numerous colleagues, none above the age of 25, continue to risk their lives to make sure that the world doesn't forget how brutal ISIS is and how little support their violent ideology has within Syrian society. And they include the local council head, Abdel, who dismissed my advice to protect himself and risk his life to cross an ISIS-controlled checkpoint to ensure that flour would be delivered into the city so residents would not starve. And finally, they include human rights activists across the country who have diligently and painfully documented civilian deaths across Syria, trying desperately to remind the world what we have known for 5 years. The problems of Syria stem from the entity that is responsible for 95% of all deaths, the Assad regime. The truth is that there's so many of these stories, and when you hear them every day, it's impossible not to have hope in the future. However, I always assumed, most likely naively, that these people would get the support needed not only to continue the work, but to expand it vigorously. Indeed, Ambassadors Ford's participation in peaceful protests, President Obama's declaration that the Assad regime must go, and our projects with local councils and civil societies, which sit at the front lines of U.S. policy in Syria, were taken as clear signals to me of our partnership. Yet as recent events have led many of our groups to begin to fear, as I have begun to now, that they have been forgotten and potentially are being left to be abandoned. Indeed, the story feels not a new one, and feels all too familiar, particularly for me. A few years ago, as ISIS began to establish itself in Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, a decision was made to promptly stop support to civil society and the governance actors, leaving them defenseless in the fight against extremism. I personally had to relay the message to Syrian actors on the ground. One of our partners' response was something I could never forget. A grown man, a respected figure in his community, he pleaded with me to reverse this inhumane decision. With tears coming down his face, this man asked me how I could do this. Not really realizing that I had no power to affect change in this policy, he asked me, what kind of values are these that leave your partners at the mercy of ISIS? By stopping our support, he told us, we effectively had been giving these regions to ISIS as a gift. I was left speechless. I felt ashamed of myself and ashamed of my government. That decision to stop funding these partners has haunted me ever since and has resulted in various executions. In at least one case of extensive torture of a local partner who I had almost daily contact with. Increasingly, these situations have made it abundantly clear that if we hope to avoid making the same mistakes of Iraq and Afghanistan, we need to make significant changes to our policy. Put simply, Assad being given the free pass to continue to extend its campaign of extermination, coupled by our inability to support moderate actors to stand up against ISIS and Jannah, threatens to irreversibly set back Syria's chance at a democratic future. To change this, the doctors, aid workers, civil servants, local advocates I have had the pleasure of working with need our urgent and undivided attention. This support should consider a few recommendations. First, we must not forget that this is an act of war. Like many have said, the most brutal since World War II, and our program should treat it as such. We are not doing civil society programming in a post-conflict transition. Everything we're doing, for better or worse, is political. It is not neutral, and is picked a side. That side is the one that rose up against the Assad regime in 2011 and continues to resist extremist groups like ISIS and Jannah every day. The operating environment that these groups work in is exceptionally complicated, and if we are really to give these chants the tools to counter violent extremism and provide an alternative to Assad, we need to have a much higher tolerance for programmatic risk. This means that Congress, the U.S. government as a whole, must allow programmatic implementers for policy coverage to operate in Syria, fully aware of the potential setbacks that will never be occurred. Second, we need to resist the desire to do programming in a copy-paste fashion and ensure that civil society and local government's programming is done from the bottom up. In Syria, civil society groups, as Marcel and some of the other folks here will tell you, they know what they're doing. They've been doing it for 5 years. We need to empower them and ensure our programming is grassroots and demand-driven, and any opportunities for direct support to Syrian NGOs should be taken. Also, we need to make sure our partners who increasingly complain about not being able to cover basic needs, including operational coverage, get the support they need to pay staff salaries and make sure the lights are on every single month of the year. Third, we need to cut the bureaucratic red tape that can require a project to take 3 to 6 months before it is approved due to excessive vetting requirements. Not surprisingly, this is too slow and unacceptable, as it severely restricts our partners' ability to respond to immediate needs that has earned them local legitimacy against well-financed and big extremist groups. Lastly, we need to stop hiding behind the notion that USG assistance alone can save Syrian lives, because our policy shortcomings risks causing more damage than any of our aid programming can ever repair. Now more than ever, we need to ensure our policy programs are aligned to support the people of Syria and their demands for a dignified future.
Thank you, Rabia. Thank you for the brief background of the work we do with civil society organizations, including challenges and lessons, and with Marcel as an activist on the ground running an organization, Kishmanik. We would like you to share your perspective with us as well.
Hello. I will try not to flirt with Rabia because I promised him not to do that in public. Okay. And okay. Let's forget about the suit. I'm not politically correct. I'm far, far away from politically correct. I'm a troublemaker. I started at 2011 by protesting against this regime. I have been hit, shot at, hidden in buildings, and 2012, the regime shot my mother, killed, and I went into 20 security investigation. 2013, I lived in the liberated areas, being stopped by ISIS 4 times. In 2014, I got arrested because I refused to wear hijab in the liberated areas because I'm a radical feminist. In 2015, I'm the CEO of a Syrian NGO that consists of 200 employees. So when they send me talking points that doesn't mention Bashar al-Assad and they consider that I'm gonna stick to it, oh my God, how wrong they are.
But you have 9 minutes.
Okay, and I will talk about Bashar al-Assad for the last 9 minutes because no one now is willing to mention him enough. There is a lot of ISIS, like extremism, terrorism, and we are Syrians in the corner of self-defense, fighting every time. We are the secular. We are against ISIS, we are that. What do we want? We want to stop the war. No, I don't want to stop the war only. I don't want to go back to 2011. I have been into too much to go back to 2010. We want democracy. And I think it's time for the modern world to deal with Middle Eastern civil society as they deserve democracy. And that as democracy as an important word to these communities and stuff like maybe rehab it, Bashar al-Assad a bit. When Victor Hisham was talking, he said the word normally, like he said, in Sams we save millions, and his eyes was sad. And I was thinking like, really? They are literally, and without exaggerating, they are saving millions. But he can't celebrate it. He can't say it with pride, because we are scared as Syrians. Because after this amount of price, really high price, and after this amount of amazing things that we are doing, we are stuck now in, are really Kerry writing our constitution? Is this leading by example on democracy that they are teaching us? Are really they are gonna rehabilitate Assad to look like, because he's modern, come on, his wife wears a skirt, who can resist that? Even if he killed 500,000, it's not something we should debate about. He has a wife that is amazing, she has a UK accent who can also resist that. Maybe Americans can resist English accent, but other words obviously doesn't. So right now we are in this phase. What civil society you want? Why we are scared? We are scared because after paying 500,000, we don't want humanity to think that dictatorship can go away with it. It's not only about Syrians anymore. If we accept that, we are saying then the Iranian, if you have a protest, go kill them. Use chemical. If you can use nuclear, it would then be better, because you will have a lot of speech about red lines, and eventually no one will do anything. When I saw in the video, Obama said, sorry, Mr. Obama, to be politically decent, Mr. Obama said, should we stand with the Syrian people or should we stand with their oppressor? Sorry, sir, you stand with our oppressor, and you stand with them too much. As a feminist, if there is a domestic abuse in a house, I don't sit next to the husband saying, by the way, you are not going to the jail. That's what America did with the Syrian regime. They said, like, we're not gonna overthrow you. We're not gonna help anyone to overthrow you. Don't worry, it's a political solution. And he kept hitting us. Then we give the women that been hidden the health kit. And we were shocked. Oh my God, the health kit didn't solve her problem. Of course, because the problem is there is a man in the house hitting her. So kick out the man of the house, put him accountable of his behavior to stop the problem. And the Syria exactly. So when people tend to say it is so complicated, no, it's not. To me, it's a major domestic abuse case. He is hitting us, he's killing us, and no one is taking him accountable on that. Right now, what is? Like, people tend to ask me, do you regret participating in the revolution? And of course, I have a lot of guilt. I'm seeing my people killed daily. I have a WhatsApp for schools, the schools that we run, and I have to check, like, are they bombed? And I have to decide from Ghazi and Tab to stop or not. And the standard is 10 barrel bombs a day, should we stop? Or 20 barrels a day, because if we stop less than that, so we are not doing education. We have to set a number, and I have to decide. Like, I tend to be control freak, but not that much control freak. Like, I tend to control my ex's clothes, but not the life of others. So right now we are in this phase, and how to move forward from that. First, we should be brave. I think in this world we need more activism. We have a lot of political people, but not enough activism. We need to push into bravery. This war should stop by removing this person from power. It doesn't. We are now discussing how to transfer millions outside of Syria instead of discussing how to transfer this person outside of Syria. So more activism. We should stop neutralizing political activists in Syria. We don't need political activists to become soft and saying, we step aside from all sides of the conflict and this. No, we are not. I stand by my people. I stand by the torture victims. I stand by the victims. So, because right now we are talking in neutrality, 10 years from now I will be here sitting discussing how to convince youth in Middle East to be politically participation. Why we are doing this? Why we neutralize people, then convince them to go back to politics, neutralize them? I don't get it. It's a waste of money and power and energy. We should consult more with Syrian civil society. We are being dealt with, and because I am a woman, I know when someone being shocked when I say something smart. Now we are dealt with at the Syrian civil society. Oh my God, they have qualifications. Like, okay, yep. We should be consulted more. The relationship regarding designing programs and implementing them should be more with the Syrian included in it, because people. Last month, someone came to us with capoeira dancing as a social and psychological technique inside the schools. We have schools that is smaller than this room. We split it into classes. We are now struggling to find gender balance regarding bathrooms to have safe space too. And they will not do capoeira dancing. And why they suggested capoeira dancing? Because they tried it somewhere, you know, somewhere successful as Afghanistan maybe. But when that says that Syrians weren't on the table when this decision been making. So that's why we ended up with money spent on the program that is failing politically. We should consult, we should be also more challenging. We don't want to be the allies of every power. Sometimes we tend to be. If the local council doesn't want to have women, so we don't challenge that. If they don't want to mention Bashar al-Assad, we don't challenge that. We are civil society. We are here to challenge all of those. We are here to change all of those. last, what I need to suggest is we should lead by example. By now, no one came to the region and worked with us and lead by example. No one suggested maternity leave. We are fighting for maternity leave for our staff regarding with INGOs. No one is like talking about democratic. No, peace, let's talk about peace, which is like something pinky. No one really gets how this peace gonna arrive for victims. No one are willing to talk about victim participation. Without victim participation, this country won't go anywhere because we have many pain in this country. So what I said, I wish that we can give you hope because I still, after all of that, I still have many hopes. But my hopes mainly are on the people, and hopefully people will change what we are trying to change, and hopefully in the future we're gonna sit here to tell you what we are doing regarding gender balance in parliament, what we are doing here regarding democracy, and we're gonna say, we told you we have an alternative, but we didn't have enough face on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Interesting. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions later. Now, Aymen, please.
Thank you. I'm very humbled to be sitting here because all of my colleagues came from very far away. I work down the street, so I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to just speak briefly. I wear multiple hats here, so I'll kind of draw from a few of them as I speak. So I am the co-founder of a humanitarian organization, and we proudly work with many of the organizations that spoke in the first panel this morning. So I'm not really going to go into any of our medical work that we do with these guys on the ground. But I do want to speak a little bit about two things that I think are very important to our mission, and I think because I don't believe that there's actually a true divide between humanitarian organizations and civil society organizations. I think the two are very complementary, and you can't have one without the other in a future Syria. One of our most important, I think, mission as a humanitarian organization is to try to keep as many professionals inside of Syria as possible by hiring as many of them as we possibly can. The majority of our employees, even outside of Syria, which there are actually very few, we have about 250 employees inside of Syria, and you know, if you look at the mass exodus of professionals inside of Syria, it's very alarming. If you look at opposition-held Aleppo, where you have about 300,000 people, you have less than 3,000 doctors, pharmacists, and dentists to serve all of these people. Then you go to the engineers, where you used to have 20,000 engineers in all of Aleppo, and now you're left with 250 engineers. That's engineers to restore, water sanitation systems. That's people to set electricity when it is available. People to rehabilitate homes in the very cold winter. And so watching a lot of these professionals leave Syria is incredibly alarming because according to statistics, 75% of the people who flee the country don't actually return, and we saw that with Afghanistan. So Syria is going to actually be left with no professionals at the rate that we're seeing. And I think this is especially problematic because if you speak to the people who worked on Iraq, they'll tell you that 10 years after the Iraq war ended, when you have all these expatriate corporations and organizations coming to actually set up shop, there was no qualified Iraqis to actually run these corporations or organizations. They brought expats from outside of Iraq to actually come. And I think, yes, and I think it's very sad to see a country as wealthy as Iraq, and I look at Syria in the same way, to be left with none of its own people to actually rehabilitate the situation. So I think keeping as many professionals is a key goal of ours. And second, I just wanted to briefly touch on higher education. There are many wonderful organizations like Ishmael working on primary and secondary education. And I think in the United States we saw Tony Blinken take a position sort of encouraging higher education. We have actually yet to see actual opportunities inside of Syria available, but this is something that our organization is working on. You went from almost 100% school attendance rate to now 6% in Aleppo. And that's, if you think of the numbers, that's 94% of the country's youth is not in school. So college is incredibly out of the question. And these are the people that we are depending on to hopefully, like I said, going back to rehabilitate the country. I wanted to briefly draw on my second hat. So I work at the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and I'm not going to go much into majority-minority issues because we've really hashed that out, but I wanted to focus on one thing, and it is the question of ISIS, and I think it's incredibly important to really put the numbers out there. Recently, he's no longer a senator, Secretary Kerry designated the Yazidis and the Christians and the Shias that they are victims of genocide in Syria. And when people ask me about this, I say I fully acknowledge that there are vulnerable minorities in the country. Like Marcel was saying, whether they are Sunnis in the Sahel or Arabs in the Kurdish region. But if you look at the numbers, 5,800 people were killed in Syria last year by ISIL. 5,700 of them were Muslims. And that is 97% of the number were actually Muslims. This is a Muslim, supposedly terrorist group, killing the majority of which are Muslims. And I think that that's really important to look at those numbers. You have 100 people that are of minority descent, 50 of about who are Christian. Like I said, as a humanitarian, I don't belittle any life, really, but I think it's really important to put that in context when the entire world is talking about the minorities that are being killed and targeted by ISIL. They are vulnerable, their churches have been closed and destroyed, but Muslims are the #1 target of this terrorist group. I wanted to quickly move to, I'm not going to expand too much on that. I just wanted to also talk about the Syrian nonviolent movement, because I'm a proud member of this organization that has been alive and has been resuscitated, I would say, in the recent past. We, in the beginning in 2011, Riaz Matlan and many other brave men and women went out into the streets, Marcel and many of them here actually with us in this audience. And for a time we thought that there was actually no room for nonviolence movement to exist. And armed groups very much played the leading role both in the media and on the ground. And I think, as someone who does support the concept of the cessation of hostilities, that allowed us the opportunity to see over 100 protests throughout Syria. As many people have mentioned before, they are protests that were not just against Bashar al-Assad and very clearly demanding for Assad to stop down. It wasn't just, we want peace. No, there were certain things that these protesters asked for. They wanted Bashar al-Assad's removal. They wanted democracy. They wanted a transparent government. They wanted a transition. As I always tell people, that the group of protesters that we recently saw come out, these were not the same guys who came out in 2011. Most of the guys who came out in 2011 were killed, arrested, or had to flee the country. So the wave of protesters that we're seeing right now in 2016 are a whole new wave of Syrians who have come out that have watched their siblings, their parents, their relatives, all die or be targeted throughout the course of this conflict. And I think that is an incredibly, despite the tragedy that we've seen unfold in this conflict, it gives me incredible hope that you cannot kill the idea of democracy and peace inside of Syria. And it's something that we absolutely need to keep in mind. And I've been in rooms with policymakers where they say, we've had to shake hands, with Saddam Hussein at certain points, or with Milosevic, or with other very bad criminals throughout history. We might just have to give up and understand that this is maybe one battle we couldn't win. And I said, with all due respect, sir, this is not your decision to make. This is the decision of the people on the ground, and even if you're okay with it, they're not okay with it. And so good luck trying to confront all of these Syrians that remain inside of the country. I'll just mention one last thing, because the lawyer in me has to say something about the Constitution. I do think, like Marcel was saying, I wanted to echo Marcel's sentiments, that it's one thing that, throughout the course of my short career, that I've gotten the opportunity to speak, especially with those in Tunisia, who charted, I think, so far a very incredible path forward in their country. And the one thing all of the parliamentarians have always emphasized is they say, do not rush the constitutional writing process. That is your new social contract. That is what you're going to base your entire society on. And that's why I just laugh. I mean, when I hear Kerry and Lavrov saying they're going to draft a constitution and present it to the Syrian people, it's a meaningless piece of paper. And I wish that it were that easy. I really wish that we could restore Syria with, just some experts in the back of a room without really, getting the input of stakeholders, but that's just not how lasting constitutions and social contracts work. And so I think it's very important for those working on this in the future to understand that it's really, you have to get the buy-in of the Syrian people, whether they are, of course, first and foremost, those inside of Syria, but there are many great people like those I'm speaking here along with that can offer incredible perspective on what should be in this future social contract for Syria. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Probably that's a segue to the future scenarios, maybe.
Is it okay if I stand? Just because
Of course.
I find it very difficult to sit for a long time. Sorry. Well, thank you, Mohammed. I would like to thank the Democracy Council and the Syrian American Council for inviting me to speak here today. It's a real honor. So, growing up in Egypt, I joined my first demonstration when I was 16. There were around 10 of us back then. We were surrounded by around 50 security officers, and we were told clearly that we're not allowed to mention the words change, regime, or corruption. It wasn't here during your time. Back then, we genuinely believed that if we can hold on to the 100th square meter that we were standing on, that and not being dispersed immediately, then that in itself would be victory. Years passed, and I became more professionally involved with the rights movement across the region. And I learned that we weren't mistaken, and that the civil space that civil society operates in, tiny as it is, constitutes the biggest threat and the biggest challenge to authoritarianism. That space that grew dramatically after 2011 was also a reality check for all of us. It made us realize how nascent the nature of civil society is. That was very clear in our lack of ability to present a coherent vision of what a post-regime transition would look like. When the time came to speak about Egypt's revolutionary constitution, we stumbled. We were not prepared. We never thought that the day would come that we would be asked about our opinion on the future constitution. When elections were mentioned, we said we're not ready for it, we need more time. We talked about transitional justice, we talked about fair trials, but everyone who was put on trial was immediately acquitted because we failed to provide a vision for reforming a judiciary that is in dire need for it. I totally understand that Syria is not Egypt and that the casualties are not to be compared, but it's also not Iraq. Syrian civil society has been developing and progressing in a very impressive manner in the last 5 years. They've stepped up, they've filled the void created by the war. They've been working on every sector, and they're incredibly impressive. They're not catching the headlines as much as ISIS is, but they are doing amazing work. These people they've created locally owned and locally driven initiatives that talk about transitional justice, local reconciliation, and community healing. They've been doing amazing work on the ground, but their voices are yet to be reflected on a higher level policy discussions in Geneva. I can't not mention Special Envoy Stefan de Mistura and his perception of civil society engagement. Mr. Niemstora's idea of including civil society in peace talks is quite disappointing, to say the least. Despite our recommendations, he's just resorted to civil society tokenism, and he handpicked a few civil society organizations that are not troublemakers and pushed them on the peace process. And even those were left without a clear mandate or a clear framework for their engagement in the process, which undermined it even more. We're quite aware that only those with guns are going to have a seat on the table, like every other conflict. But we also know for a fact that these people should not be left to write Syria's future constitution on their own. I know that I am running out of time, and I will be very brief, but just one last remark. Syrians not only, I'll echo my colleagues when I say Syrians don't just want food and shelter, and they definitely don't just want a refugee status in Sweden. They want freedom, and after 5 years, they realize quite well that it's not going to be granted to them by any political elite, neither their politicians, the opposition, or the regime, or the international community for that matter, and that they're going to have to fight all sides for it, and they will. And this fight is not going to end by regime change. It might even get tougher. And we have to be prepared for it. The war might not end tomorrow, and it might not end in August, despite Secretary Kerry's hopeful wishing. But it will end one day. And when it does end, there's only going to be a brief moment of opportunity for civil society to step in and present their vision for the future of Syria. And when that happens, we need to be able to provide a concrete vision. We need to help them, support them to do so, and not repeat the mistakes of Egypt, Libya, and other countries in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I personally would not ask questions because I'm sure, just for the sake of time now, I can take this back. I'm sure I would probably better give this time to the group in the room here. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for the four wonderful panelists who actually give us different perspectives to civil society work, whether from a background perspective or even from a future or working towards a future perspective. So please, if you have any questions.
My question to Doreen, your organization the day after, have you structured any like a guideline or main point of what to do after, let's say, the regime falls tomorrow, inshallah? What's the day after going to be? What any advices or any criteria that you have worked on?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So one of the things the day after I was working on, and it was basically the initial idea that the organization was created around, was to come up with actually first to have a series of deliberations among Syrian activists and intellectuals around try to create a joint vision for the transition. So they came up with a very lengthy document, a roadmap for the transition that is divided into a few components, including security sector reform, constitutional drafting, social economic reform, electoral reform, and social economic reform as well. The document was established in 2012, so it was created under very different assumptions. The situation has changed drastically since then. The number of casualties are not to be compared. So what we're working on now is trying to work on each of these sectors and try to see the different contexts, how the context changed since the document was drafted, and try to come up with joint recommendations around each and every sector based on the changing assumptions. So it is basically our core mission to try to create that joint vision.
Yes, but please name an organization or affiliation.
Me?
Yeah, you were raising your hand. Okay, you changed your mind, that's fine.
No, that's our affiliation. I'm a Syrian lawyer, and I do study here at Washington College of Law. I'm a human rights activist. My affiliation is just to Syria. I had great honor working with both you guys, Daria and Syria, and that was a great experience to me, and I learned a lot from you guys. And I want to ask you, because I want to direct the question to you specifically because you are not Syrians, but you can easily step into Syrians' shoes right now. How do you look at the opposition side? And Darin, just you briefly mentioned the opposition failed to just allow youth people to be engaged in political discourse. So what recommendation you have to this just failed opposition, and what liability that the opposition or responsibility may take in this crisis that we are facing right now? Second question,
That's already two questions.
yes, no, this is one. The second question is one. It's about the second question. I was asked yesterday if I were in a sophisticated position in the administration, how would I invest American money? And I want to just ask you to respond to this question on behalf of me. Thank you, guys.
So this is for both Rabia and Zaid, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with Rabia.
All right, sounds good. I will at least do the first question. And try to get this done. In terms of the question, I think it's a good one, thank you. And obviously, you know, it's a pleasure for me to work with you as well. I look forward to you coming back, as you would. But, you know, for me, the question about the opposition is almost a redundant one. And it's one that we've been asking that has a clear answer that we don't want to accept. And that answer is that they exist. And they're not out of these manifestations and creations of bodies that exist in Turkey for the most part. They are inside the country. And they are inside the country, and as I mentioned in my remarks, they are across the country. They're responding to everyday needs. They include civil society groups that we work with, and local councils and provincial bodies that are responding to people's needs. That is the opposition, if we want to call it, if we want to keep using that word. These are the groups that have local legitimacy, and these are the groups that will determine Syria's future. What happens, I've had, you know, I don't know if it's the honor or the unfortunate, I guess, experience, but somewhere in between, I suppose. I'm not only working with civil society groups, local councils, but also with something that you guys may be familiar or not with the ACU, the Assistance Coordination Body. I won't go into too much details about why that was not the most successful experience. But again, I would just reemphasize that there is groups that have from day one existed inside the country that continue to respond to people's needs, are represented by people on this panel, and much more inside the country that can give access to this country. And those are the people that we need to be looking to.
Thank you, Rabia. Responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just briefly add to that. As much as I appreciate the different categories that they are listed, and I work with all of them, and I look up to the work they do, I just don't think that contradicts to what Marcel said, that we need to hold into account, we need to pressure them, we need to pressure everyone to remember the values of the revolution, because if the HNC were to be left without that pressure, they're going to forget what they were sent out there to do. And we've seen that with the ACU, with the Syrian Opposition Coalition. We've seen it in different forms of the more organized opposition entities that were created in the last few years. And that is the responsibility of Syrian civil society, to keep on pushing everyone and to make sure that the space that was created after the revolution is preserved. Because again, I'm going to keep on saying that it's very easy to just see it gradually shrink until it disappears entirely. We can't take it for granted that the HNC, in its current form and shape, is going to advocate for women's rights, or for civil society rights, or for freedom of assembly or association. We need to remind them that this is what this revolution is about. That answers your question.
Can I answer the money one?
Yes.
I want to answer the money one.
Maybe Aymen will direct a question to you.
No, he asked the question regarding if he is at administration and he will take the money decision. Okay, I will publish among Syrian civil society the definition of moderate armed groups. What is considered moderate to the Americans, so they're gonna support, and then I will support these armed groups who fit the standards. Because if someone told us like the ability to work with civil society, not having a prison, not having torture, not having children soldier, we will go there and we will push them into these 4 standards, knowing that this promise is gonna be met. Because for the last 5 years, we heard a lot of promises and definition that is not being met yet. So this is be my priority. I want no-fly zone. I need to work without the guilt of having a massacre in my school. I need a no-fly zone. So later on, I will support civil society, I think.
Aymen?
Do you still have time? I have three questions.
Oh my God.
What is his name?
I'm Ahmed Kurdwatch. I'm Syrian. I work on governance and civil society from Istanbul and Gaziantep in Turkey. My first question is to Marcel, actually. Whether we like it or not, we're living now the momentum of the cessation of hostilities. And whether we liked it or not, now the international diplomacy has been built based on this momentum, and that's like for the foreseeable future, that's the case in Syria. So Marcel, if you were meant to give us specific demands that you think the ISSG should work at regarding supporting the civil society in Syria, taking advantages of the cessation of hostilities environment, if it was meant to last. So this is from the Syrian perspective to Marcel. And to the second question for Rabia, also in light of the cessation of hostilities, do you think that the donor agencies have the tools to support the necessities that the civil society organization need to have within the cessation of hostilities, the funding mechanisms, the sustainability elements, etc.? And to Darine, my third question, based on your experience in Egypt and also your academic background within the chaotic situation that the Syrian civil society lives nowadays. Every 3 Syrians are able to form their own organization. I'm starting mine very soon. How could we prevent donors and political players from taking advantage of the chaos to create their own donor darlings, organizations and activists, and to keep the consistency and the persistency of the demands of the Syrian civil society, the grassroots organizations, in all the international and diplomatic corridors? Thank you.
Marcel?
Okay, this was a tough question. Yes, ceasefires. I don't know if I still believe in local ceasefires, especially when it is a blackmailing paper. Now Aleppo is in it, now Aleppo out in it, now Daria is in it. So it's kind of you are betraying others. If Aleppo in it, I will be yes with the ceasefire, and I will be cheering for it. And that was the case when Aleppo was in the ceasefire. We were happy, we were relaxed, we sat at the office and discussed moving into Aleppo. And we forgot that Daria are not included, and they are being killed in Daria. 1 month later, yeah, thanks God, Bashar al-Assad spread death equally. It was Aleppo's turn to die, and we were excluded from and we work only in Aleppo, so we are on daily basis. We stopped the school, we stopped the community centers, and we started Aleppo is burning campaign. So to say like, include Aleppo in it. So local ceasefires, I will be pushing as a civil society into larger scale ceasefire, not local scale ceasefires, because it means nothing. We are not dying here, but they are still dying in there. So, and we will push into moving in. I don't believe in remote management, and I didn't think that we should stay this elite English speaking. I believe that change is in there. And when there's a ceasefire, we should go in there to work on it. But it should be there. It should be. When I talk now about women's rights, people tend to tell me, you and Ali actually tell me that it's not a priority, we have 100 deaths a day. I'm competing with right to life. When I stop competing with right to life, I will be able to do more and more social change. So to me, it's like civil society will move in and try to tackle every aspect of. But we should know that this ceasefire do exist, because by now I don't believe it do exist. It's something like Santa Claus. You see its effect, but you don't really see it. So yeah, if there is something like this, I will be pushing into moving in, playing from the ground, more social change, more discussing regarding constitution with public, with Syrians, not only in the elite classes discussing the same exact circumstances. So yeah, this will be my priority if something happens. And we already discussed it in the office. 70% of our staff decided to go in. The ceasefire is as we are like, and to us it is a number to someone to go back into Aleppo, not knowing really what the situation gonna be. But not competing with this will make us more powerful, and we will have more ethical ground to start with
Thank you
achieving
very
change.
much. Thank you very much. We have tools to support quickly, because we have 2 minutes.
Try to be quick. So thanks, Amber, for your question. I think I have 2 things to say. First and foremost, I think that we've recognized, particularly over our work over the last few years, is that Syrian NGOs themselves have established themselves to be capable of doing direct funded projects. When I first started 3 years ago, proposals I would receive were 1 sentence long and had a budget with $300,000 at the end. We're no longer there. These groups know how to write full proposals. They know how to monitor projects, and instead of empowering them to take a more direct role in managing their projects, which they know how to do best, we're actually moving in the opposite direction of having bigger, firms come into the Syrian landscape that have massive overhead costs that trickle down a few dollars down to the Syrian partners. And so we're actually moving in the opposite direction, primarily because of our over-obsession of risk, as I mentioned in my presentation. We need to recognize what kind of context we're working in, and we need to recognize that the Syrian local partners are the ones that know best to do and empower them to do the job. On that note, second thing, I know you're looking at me. I know this is, I'm going to stay
All of
consistent.
us
I will stay consistent with my boring remarks and say that core funding is the most essential thing that can be provided. I know that we don't like that. We want to do programmatic funding, and we want to do all the cool stuff that after these evenings can be done, but the reality is we need these partners to exist. We need them to be around 6 months from now. We need them to be around a year from now. We need them to be in the country. And to do that, unfortunately, most of our organizations shy away from core funding in an unbelievable way. Real quick example, do I have time?
In 30 seconds, yes?
Real quick example, we worked with a group, Independent Doctors Association, group in Aleppo, one of the primary responders to health concerns in Aleppo province. This group, when they came to me a year and a half ago, they had 1 staff member in Gaziantep. They were managing $1.5 million across a 6-month period. They had no staff, administration staff covering. Out of the 10 donors they had $20,000 that could go to staff salaries. Do the math. That's not one person that can be covered. Everyone else working on a volunteer basis. As a result of some of the work that we were able to do to cover those programmatic costs, this group over an 8-month period was able to expand the programming to $10 million every 6 months. They were able to open up a number of new facilities inside Syria, and they have a team of 10 individuals who are working on everything from M&E, financial management, to programmatic development. And this kind of support and things like that need to be continued.
Thank you, Abdel. Dareen, it's a challenge, but I know you're up to it. How can we, in 3 sentences, prevent darlings, CSOs?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about speaking English that quickly, so it's not gonna work that way. But there's a short answer and there's a quite longer answer. The short answer is embrace the chaos. The longer answer is there are 2 approaches to that. I mean, post-revolution Egypt, there's around 1,500 organizations that were created. I think only 4 of them survived, because that's what happens when the transition occurs. The momentum picks up, and then only the good ones survive. Again, from a legal standpoint, Syrian civil society organizations should start thinking about drafting their NGO law and how that's going to look like. And again, we should step away or step back from thinking of structuring everything and giving the executive branch authority over these organizations, because that's not how it's going to work. But again, for now, embrace the chaos. The good ones are going to survive. The ones that were created to cater to a donor's agenda or to a political agenda, for that matter, is going to fade away because their mission is short-term and it's not sustainable.
Thank you very much, Dareen. Thanks, Romana. Rabia, Marcel. Jim, can I go eat now?
Yeah, and then we watch, we eat all all the panel, I'm watching people eating. All the
Okay,
panel.
do you want to give a break for 5-10 minutes and then the next session, or do you want to have the next session over lunch? Session over lunch. Okay, no break, nobody leaves.
Mr. Abdel,
Yes.
I'm Victoria Liu. I'm a student at Princeton University and I'm working on a thesis on Syria and its fragmentation under Ambassador Kurtzer. I was wondering if I could grab an email from you and ask you a few questions over email.
Yeah, Ambassador what?
Kurtzer, Daniel Kurtzer,
Yes.
as well as under the advisory of Ambassador Frederick Barton, the former Assistant Secretary of State.
Okay, this is my card.
Okay,
And this is my email here.
Okay, perfect.
And this, I will give you also my telephone here in US. I'm in California time zone. You are in which university?
Princeton.
Princeton. Oh, very prestigious. Ivy. Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to help you. I used to be with UCLA. 11 to 12, we worked with the center with the postgraduate students who were doing like PhD about the region. So I'm familiar with this type. So.